At the Sports History Network, we're proud to introduce you to a new sponsor for our podcasts. It's Home Field Apparel, your premium collegiate apparel brand right out of Indianapolis. They've got incredibly comfortable t-shirts, plus they're officially licensed with vintage college designs. They have over 150 plus colleges available now and always adding more. Homefield digs through the archives and history of your school to find unique logos, mascots, and moments to make thoughtful designs for your school. When you shop today, new customers can get a 15% discount off their first purchase using the promo code SPORTSHISTORY at checkout. You can learn more at homefieldapparel.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I want to welcome you back because this is part 2 of a 3-part series crossover event for the Football History Dude and yesterday's sports. Mark and Dave are reliving Super Bowl X. And if you didn't listen to part 1, well, you're going to have to pause, head back there, and listen to the first part that we released yesterday. And if you already did listen to it, well, let's jump right in.
I think they threw one pass out of the three downs.
Yeah, I think they threw one.
I can't remember.
But I'll tell you another big play. That was the first. It was actually the first play of the fourth quarter. Dallas punted, and I don't remember I can't remember the name of the Pittsburgh Steeler who fielded the punt. He fumbled it. The punt,
yes,
17-yard line. And the Cowboys did not recover that fumble. I always wonder what would have happened because they were up 10-7. If they would have recovered that fumble on the 17-yard line and punched it in for a touchdown, I always wonder that might have been enough. 17-7 with the way their defense was playing. That might have been enough to win the game, but they didn't recover.
They went into you're right. They were still playing pretty good. They kind of had momentum. They hadn't gotten to that malaise that they had gotten into after all those things started going wrong, like the interception by. In fact, that interception I talked about that Staubach threw to Glenn Edwards, that was the same play they scored on with Drew Pearson in the first quarter. Staubach later said it was the first time it didn't work all year.
Used it many times during the season. He said that was the first.
You got to give Pittsburgh credit for that.
Absolutely.
You got to give them credit for recognizing that. Mike Wagner recognized that play, and he said they went back to it, and we picked them off.
And you're right. Staubach said that's the first time all season that it didn't work. It worked every single time.
Unbelievable. But it was still a close game at 15 to 10. You know?
I just wonder what would have happened if they recovered that punt.
And not only that, you know that play you're talking about with the return, there was a series of downs where the Cowboys had the ball. I think it was after they held Pittsburgh to a field goal. They got the ball back, and they broke Golden Richard's ribs. If you watch the game again, you'll see where it happens. He either punches him or he goes to block him. And while Golden Richards is down on the ground, the guy is kneeling on the side of his helmet with his knee. He's not letting him up. When he gets up, he says something to him, and the Pittsburgh player takes a swing at him. Once again, no penalty. No pen. There could have been 2 or 3 penalties in that game that could have been called that were kind of, but, you know, you could see him kneeling on his head if you watch it. It's very clear as day. Of course, when you're watching the game in real time, nobody's picking up on this crap. But when you go back and watch it now, you're going to see these things. Do you mean it? Because you're looking for stuff.
I think that was Mel Blount who cracked.
I think you're right. There goes Mark.
Knocked him out of the game. And I hate to say, And I met Mel Blount at the Hall of Fame. I didn't bring that play up to him.
They say he's a very nice guy.
Took a picture with my son. They even got Bobby Bell. He was hanging around with Bobby Bell. He called Bobby Bell over to get in the picture. But I almost wanted to ask him about that play. What was up with that play in Super Bowl X when you cheap shot at Golden Richards? But I remember an interview. This is kind of funny. There was an interview I watched with Golden Richards. They were interviewing Golden Richards. They asked him about that play, and he said, yeah, it was a cheap shot, but he said that was, he said that was common back in the 1970s. It was part of the game. It was accepted. He said, but I did get him back. He said 2 years later, we were playing them in a regular season game. He said, I got him back I caught him like on a crackback block in the back of his legs. He said, I got him back. And as he was laying there, Mel Blount was laying on the ground, writhing in pain. He said, I walked past him. I looked down and I said, that's payback for Super Bowl X.
No, listen, the stuff that went on. Look, the game was much, much, much more. They could say the guys are bigger and faster today, and they are. But the game was much more physical back then. They were hammering guys downfield. I think he only got one shot, but you could do it anywhere. It was after 10, 15 yards, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the rule,
it was
Mark?
brutal. Oh, yeah. And it was...
I mean, but that next series, after the Cowboys had to punt again, the Cowboys' offense went stale there. See, that was the big problem. Pittsburgh was getting really tough. And when they punted back, Pittsburgh had the ball, and that was the long pass down the middle he threw to Swan. And you know something? All these passes that Swan made that day, he made some great catches. The one on the sideline, that acrobatic catch, that one down the middle. Mark Washington had pretty good coverage on all three of those. It's not like the guy was getting burned.
No,
he really wasn't.
He was on them, but how can you defend that? If the guy makes a spectacular...
Those were very well-placed very well-placed balls and great catches, and that was the kind we thought it was the backbreaker. We said this game is over now because they missed the extra point. So at that point, it's 21-10, and Pittsburgh got all the momentum. But Bradshaw, we used to call him, when I was a kid, we used to call him the salami head because he didn't have any hair on his head, and it looked like salami. And anyway, we couldn't stand him because we beat the Cowboys. The salami had got knocked out of the game, Mark.
Larry.
Okay? You go back and watch them taking him off. They just picked the guy up. Today they would bring out a stretcher. They're just basically almost dragging the guy off the field. And who was it that hit him under the chin? Was it Larry Cole?
Yep. Hit him right under the chin.
Tremendous.
Took him out. Concussion. He didn't even know where he was. I think Bradshaw has said.
He was pointing to the side of his head on the sidelines. You go back and watch it, and he's telling them, like, either he couldn't hear or his ears were ringing. Maybe he was telling him, but you could see it. He was done for
I
the
remember
day.
hearing him say that he doesn't even remember the last, after that, he doesn't remember the rest of the game. He doesn't even know what happened. But you're right.
They didn't even take him in for anything. He's just sitting on the bench, completely knocked out. Like, they didn't even take him into the locker room or nothing. Unbelievable. No, it was tremendous, actually. Well, people go, what do you mean it's tremendous? No, I don't care. It was tremendous back then. You know what I mean? It's not like that anymore today.
And then, like you said, Dallas got the ball back. 21-10, we think it's over. 21-10. It only took them 5 plays. Staubach got sacked on one of those. Of those 5 plays, he got sacked on one of them. The other 4 were all...
That's right.
The other 4 were all completions. And they got a quick touchdown.
They went right downfield. Bing, bang, boom, like it was nothing.
And then the same guy, the same Steeler fan that I was debating with, who was knocking his own kicker, I said, your kicker saved the touchdown, and you complain. He put his body on the line, and you're complaining that he missed a couple of field goals. So now the same guy's debating with me that, well, the only reason Dallas scored that late touchdown is because the Steelers defense went to sleep. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, Chuck Noll, your coach is Chuck Noll. Nobody goes to sleep. Chuck Noll was no different than Landry, Vince Lombardi, Don Shula. Those guys, if you didn't give 100% effort with those coaches, you go to practice the next day, your locker's empty. You'll find an empty locker, and you'll have a ticket to get on the bus because they don't put up with that. So I don't know.
And you'd get pulled out of the game.
Pulled out of the game. So this guy's trying to tell me that the Steelers defense went to sleep. No, Staubach did what he always did. That's why they called him Captain Comeback. Captain Comeback.
Yeah, he took him downfield, Mark. And let me ask you this, because I've been dying to ask you all week. When they kicked off, they did an onside kick. I know they were kind of running out of time. I think there was only a minute and 50-something seconds at that point.
The onside kick, yeah.
Do you think, what if they kicked the ball away? In other words, what happened, we didn't know this, Arnie, but when the Steelers came onto the field for the offensive series, Bradshaw did not come out. Out comes Terry Hanratty.
He threw 7 passes the whole season, I think.
Oh. And so now, Pittsburgh, instead of having the ball maybe on the 20 or the 25-yard line, they got the ball kind of up near midfield. That's where they got it on the onside kick. And what happened was one of the craziest scenarios. I think they gained 2 or 3 yards out of the first 3 plays. And when 4th down comes up, Arnie, everybody's expecting him to punt, pin the Cowboys way back. They go for it because they claimed that they had a lot of problems with the kicker and they didn't want to risk a blocked kick and all this stuff. And so they figured, well, we'll go for it and we'll just rely on our defense. And people couldn't believe it. They needed, I think, was it 8 yards, Mark, or 7? It wasn't even close. They got 2 yards.
It was 4th and 9, and they got 2 yards. But like you said, Chuck Noll didn't want to punt because they had a lot of problems. They were having a lot of problems, and there were several punts that Dallas almost blocked in that game. He didn't want to risk it.
Correct.
He did not want to risk it, so he relied on his defense.
The other thing, Mark, is going back to the kickoff. If they did kick away and they held them like they did, think of the field position Dallas would have had. Do you know what I mean? And they ended up getting pretty good field position anyway because they stopped them, but they might even have been able to go for another. They would have had to punt. They wouldn't have been able to give the ball up down at the 25-yard line. They would have had to punt. But I guess the onside kick was the most logical thing to do. But they got the ball back, and this was terrible. And I know you're going to agree with me. The Cowboys had a minute and 22 seconds left. So that's 82 seconds. 82 seconds with their last possession. And I thought about it, and they had no timeouts. No timeouts. So they would have to run sideline patterns. But you see teams do it today. They run sideline. Either ball's completed or it's thrown out of bounds or whatever, or the guy gets out of bounds. But with 82 seconds, I would think you should be able to get probably at least 8 plays around there. That's 10 seconds of play. That's actually a lot. They only ran 5 plays. The one play that bothered me was Preston Pearson catching a ball and then inexplicably turning inside instead of getting out of bounds. He runs towards the middle of the field. I don't know what the hell he was thinking. There was no time. Why did he get out of bounds?
He was usually a very smart player, usually a very intelligent player, but I don't know what he was thinking there. Did he forget about the clock?
That's the guy, Arnie, that came from Pittsburgh, by the way. Anyways, look, I don't know. I watched the 5 plays they ran. I'm thinking, even my buddy Angelo, he's a big 49er fan. We've watched the end of that game. Angelo is a sharp guy. He picks up on stuff quick. And he said to me, he was the first time he ever watched the full series of that. because he was living in the United States when I don't even know if he moved here in '83 from Italy, but he's sharp. He's a sharp football fan. He said to me, that was terrible clock management. And I said, you're right. It kind of was terrible clock management. Those last 5 plays.
There was a scramble in there.
I know.
Right? There was a Staubach scramble. Right. They rushed him again, and he had to scramble. And I think he gained about 10 yards, but he wasn't able to get out of bounds either. Those plays.
No, he wasn't able to get out of bounds. And there was no sense of urgency. That's what I was looking for. Like, they were just they didn't call like 2 plays in the huddle and just right back up to the line. They were like huddling up. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Even when I watched the game when I was a kid, watching it, as a young guy, I was like, what the heck is happening? And then, they ran a couple of plays downfield. One of them hit the guy right on the helmet.
If you watch that play, if he had been maybe a yard or 2 further back, he would have caught that ball. Just a yard or 2.
Arnie must be saying, what the heck are these guys? These guys are talking about stuff that happened 50 years ago.
We're still not over.
It was a tremendous game. It was the first very exciting, Super Bowl V was exciting, but it was sloppily played. I'll say it again. This was the first really well-played, very close Super Bowl.
That Percy Howard. Watch really that play with Percy Howard, where it hits him on the helmet.
Percy Howard, Arnie, caught the touchdown on the drive before. Was that his only catch all year, Mark?
It might have been his only catch of his career. I think he was only there for a year or 2. I think that might have been his only catch ever.
Absolutely tremendous.
Touchdown in the Super Bowl, and then the next year he was gone. But you watch that play where it hit him in the helmet, and you'll see what I mean. If he had been just a one or 2 yards further back, he would have caught it. Would have landed right in his hands. Yep. Right in his hands. But great.
Yeah, no. Then the final play of the game, Staubach tried to pump to the middle, and then he threw a ball, and I think Mike Wagner picked it off in the end zone. It ricocheted off of somebody.
Yeah.
I think. And the game was over. And it was very disappointing as as a young guy, you're watching it, and the season was so surprising. What was their regular season record that year?
10-4.
10-4, and they took Pittsburgh down to the wire in the Super Bowl. It was a great game. It was, I give Pittsburgh credit. They got through some things in that game, and they got through it, and they ended up winning.
Pittsburgh's defense played tremendous. It was really quite a defensive battle, that game. The defense.
And Joe Green was not healthy. Right.
I think after that, he had an injury. I forget what it was. I can't remember.
A shoulder injury.
I mean,
he was losing. His arm was going numb.
He was never quite as dominant after that injury, I don't think. From 1969, I think his first season was 1969. For his first 7 seasons, he was the most dominant defensive lineman in football. And then after that injury, although he was still a great player, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he was ever quite as dominant after that injury. And he started to get a lot.
Yeah.
That's why when people ask me, a lot of times they'll ask, who are your best, who do you put in your top 5 defensive tackles? I always put Lilly and Olsen as my top 2. And then they'll say, what about Joe Green?
Hands down.
They always say, what about Joe Green? The only reason I don't put Joe Green in the same category with those 2 guys is because a lot of injury. He wasn't as durable. Not that that was his fault, but he just wasn't as durable as Lilly and Olsen. Those guys hardly ever missed a game or a play.
Look, Yeah. What people don't understand is Lily retired in 74.
Right.
Lily's on the 1960s and 1970s
That's
All
right.
Decade teams. The guy had played half the decade, and he still got on the 70s. That's how tremendous he was. But people have no idea how tremendous Bob. They don't even get it. My buddies to this day, they go, they try to get me going, and they go, oh, look at this, look at this Reggie White. Oh, he was as good as Lily. They just want to try to push my buttons. Look, I don't care. Listen to me. We laugh about it because they know I'm going to laugh. I'm going to get mad. I laugh. Lily was like Landry said. There'll never be another. But he was like a man among boys. And even Staubach said, when we went into those meetings and we watched game films on Mondays and Tuesdays, whenever we watched them, people were, look, I would make a good pass and people would say stuff. He goes, but they were absolutely oohing and eyeing at Bob Lilly. They were in awe of it because the guy was so quick off the ball.
No,
you couldn't get into him. He didn't have any long range speed, but his speed 10 yards or 15 yards this way and that way were just absolutely phenomenal. And he was such a strong guy. And, a lot of that, he didn't pick up any weights. Dan Reeves talks about it. He said, Lily, if you looked at him, you'd think he was the last. He had no muscle tone whatsoever. Okay? But look, a lot of that stuff was, Lily wrote a book, and in the book he talked about his father pulling an engine out of a car because the hoist was broken. Do you understand that? So you can chalk it up to that. You could chalk it up to genes, whatever you want to chalk it up to. Farm work,
right?
Whatever it was. You watch him against these, and this was a guy not sometimes double teamed like these guys today. They go, he gets double teamed. Oh, please, these guys get double teamed today. One play out of 20. It's a joke. This guy was getting double teamed almost every single, sometimes triple teamed.
He was the first guy really to get triple teamed.
He was like Landry said, and he coached a lot of them. He coached Staubach, the greatest player I ever coached. He called Lily,
and
he was that good. You could go back now and look at some of the clips. There's a highlight thing on YouTube of Lily when he won some all-conference. He wasn't part of the thing because he moved to Oregon for a little bit. Then he came back to Texas, but they let him and they show a series of just plays and how he can get a guy and control him. He could control guys at the line of scrimmage and get rid of them quickly. He was just that good.
He was a master at using his hands. He would just, and like you said,
yep. Before it became
he was
popular.
so fast. Like you said, he was so fast off the ball. He'd get his hands up under the guy's shoulder pads and grab him and throw him out of the way. That's how he had. Oh yeah,
like it was nothing. And then there's a clip of him talking about they used to sit in the meeting room, and he said that we would look at the film. He said we noticed that when you had made contact, you had the tendency to blink. So we would watch film and we would hit our eyes with our fingers. Yeah. Walt Garrison talked about it. He said we thought they were going like losing their mind. Like, why are these guys? And we were trying to prevent ourselves from blinking by hitting our eyeball with our finger. He said, and eventually, but he said, I would be in a 4-point stance and I would be so close. I could see the man's whiskers across the line of scrimmage from me. This is what Lily was talking about. And I tell you something, to this day, as great as Randy White was, and I put him in that group of some of the best defensive linemen to ever play. I'll put him in there with Alan Page, and I'll put him in there with some of these other guys. Even he said it was the ultimate compliment to get mentioned in the same sentence with Bob Lilly.
That's right.
He said it at his Hall of Fame induction speech. Randy White said it. I filmed it. I was there. He talked about that's how great Lily was.
He retired. He didn't get to go to that first Super Bowl.
But,
that would have been his
you go back to that Super Yes, exactly. Go back to that Super Bowl 10 that we just talked about. That was the first year without Lily.
Yep.
And they moved, I believe they moved Well, George was Larry. Jethro
Yes.
Pugh was still there, but what's his name was playing in Lily's spot.
Larry Cole.
You had Ed Jones and Harvey Martin, and I think
Yeah,
they
he
moved
played.
Larry
He
Cole.
could play both. He could play both defensive end and defensive tackle.
Yes,
Larry Cole. Yeah, that was. You're right.
correct.
Pugh and Larry Cole were defensive tackles in that game. Jones and Martin were the defensive end.
Yes, and what happened was they would take Larry Cole out on third downs, if you notice, and they were bringing Randy White in as a linebacker, and he was rushing from an upright position on the end.
Yep.
He had a sack of Bradshaw in that game. He was a rookie, Randy White, and he was playing on all the special teams.
They didn't know where to play him.
Which kind of backfired on them later on.
They didn't really know where to play him in the beginning. Because in college, he played defensive end, right? But he wasn't that big. I think when he came into the NFL, he was only about 240 or 245. So that's why they said, linebacker. He was supposed to replace Leroy Jordan, that middle linebacker. That didn't work out. Then they tried him at outside linebacker. They didn't know what to do with him. They knew he was a great athlete, but they didn't know what to do with him. So they told him, I think it was Ernie Stautner, told him during the off season, go on a weight training program, gain weight, and we're going to put you out back. That was it. No.
He couldn't cover Mark. He couldn't cover Randy White. And so what was going on was they put him in as a down lineman. He flourished. He wasn't as, I don't think he was as, he rushed the passer and stopped the run. He could do it. He had about 103 or 105 sacks from the defensive tackle position, which was almost unheard of at that time. And he was another guy that was getting double teamed. He had a completely different style of rushing, and he was just absolutely relentless. I
think he could have been a good defensive end too in the NFL, but they already had Martin and Jones, so there was no room for him at defensive end. The only defensive tackle we lose, Dave. He's still there. Oh, all right.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I had to check on something. I thought somebody was at the door for some reason, but I heard it's the wind and the rain. It just started raining like a crazy thing, but Randy White was absolutely, even at the end of his career, he was still kind of the last 2 years, not so much, but 1987 and 1988, he was still playing halfway decent.
The offensive linemen started they were all weighing over 300 pounds. So I don't think it was just age, towards the end of his career. I don't think it was just age that caught up to him. But these offensive linemen were outweighing him by about 50 pounds. That's when the guys from the Redskins, the Hogs, Joe Jacoby, and all those guys, these guys were weighing 315 pounds.
No, you're right. He said he used to go up. He said the guy that gave him a real hard time was Bob Young. I used to talk to him about that because he said to me, Bob Young was one of these 300-pounders where, you'd have to hit him up under the chin. You couldn't even move him, And he had speed. I could get around him, he said, but these guys were really, really tough. Landry would show the clips on Monday, and he would say, you got to tackle him. You're giving up too much on first down. You got to get him on the line of scrimmage. He goes, you could always tell when you had a bad game. He called you by your last name instead of your first name. So Landry would play he said, and he would play it back over and over. White, you got to stop him on the line of scrimmage. Click. White, you got to stop him on the line of scrimmage. You play the play over and over. And he said, I felt like saying, I can't stop him on the line of scrimmage, coach. You try it. So this is what was going on with, So, and he talked about that, but he was tremendous. But that was his rookie year, that Super Bowl 10. And that was Thomas Henderson's rookie.
Dirty dozen,
what, 12 rookies that year, Mark?
The dirty dozen.
There you go. The dirty dozen. Now come back tomorrow and hear about some interesting stories, finishing off Super Bowl 10, and then a fun conversation between Mark and Dave talking mostly about kind of the generational gap type of stuff of NFL and their fans. And what's the best way to do that, you ask? Well, you can make sure you mash that little subscribe or follow button on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get notified as soon as the episode releases. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
I put up my replica 1909 World Series program poster from Row 1 brand, and that's all it took for Marla to do a complete redesign of the Guardian offices, doing up the walls with tremendous prints from baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and more sports events. And every one of them can't help but trigger memories of sports yesteryear.
And here's the last one. Let's put it up here by your desk. Perfect.
Ah, that's a nice one. College football, 1923. Navy versus Penn State. Do you remember that game, Marla?
I sure do. It was October 20th, 1923. Cloudy, but a reasonable 57 degrees at the 2:30 kickoff time. Over 20,000 turned out at Beaver Field in College Station, Pennsylvania for this clash of two of the nation's top teams. The Nittany Lions were the underdogs, despite having won their first 3 games by a combined score of 94-0. The heavy favorites were the Midshipmen, who went on to play in the Rose Bowl after the season.
Right, and the game immediately became...
The entire color of the game would ultimately be dominated by Penn State's star halfback Harry Wilson, but both offenses took some time to get going for a good 22 minutes before Wilson got the crowd to their feet with an interception of Bill McKee's forward pass, returning it all the way for his first touchdown of the day.
Wilson certainly was great
On the next kickoff, who would end up as returner but Harry Wilson? Wilson dodged at least a half dozen
Recall the
defenders
greatest
on a
moments in sports
77-yard
history,
stop
or just
to
your
the
own
end zone
personal
before he
favorites,
gone for a
with
scoreless
Row 1
tug
brand
of war to a
sports
2-touchdown
paraphernalia.
blowout in
Don't
less than a
delay.
minute, with
Visit
hometown
today
fans ready to
at
count a fourth win for
sportshistorynetwork.com/Row1.
PSU.
That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville, Mulligan.
When the gun
Sports
started
Right,
to mark the
coming
Navy
soon.
cast, the score remained Penn State 14, Navy 0. The second half had barely begun when Harry Wilson and Penn State went on to work on Navy again.